I'd like to thank you all for coming out today to see an architect presents undeniable evidence for a 9/11 conspiracy between some in government and the media, mainstream media. I'm going to stick to a schedule, and the first hour will be on the World Trade Center, and the second hour will be on the Pentagon. I'm also going to stick to my notes here because I like to do these free form. They feel better that way. But on the other hand, if I do it that way, I always leave something out that I wish I would have put in the presentation. So the presentation will take the form of forensic evidence. You will be treated basically as the audience as a jury, and the evidence will be presented as if we were in a courtroom. And we will speak somewhat about what the government officials have said about 9/11 and how it happened and what happened. And then we will see the evidence and see if the evidence actually backs up their claim of what they've said. The government and the media have used the term conspiracy theories from the very beginning, and they still use it. Now they call some people 9/11 truthers if they're into looking into evidence. But the fact is the government also has a conspiracy theory. Of course, that is what they've told us from the very beginning on 9/11, 2001, which is that 4 jet airliners were hijacked by radical Muslim extremist, Islamo-fascist, as it just keeps getting longer, the term they use for them, and that they have crashed 2 of them into the, one into the North Tower, one into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, one into the Pentagon, and one crashed in Shanksville. And we will talk a little bit about all of those jetliners and what happened. And so let's get right into it. And at the end, you will be able, I will pass around a form, and I'll cover this form, everything on this form. And it will determine whether or not the evidence supports the government media assertion as a ridiculous assertion, or that they refuse to verify and investigate the evidence that's been found, or release information related to the evidence that's been found, or whether they just flat out lied. So those are 3 categories of what the government and media is saying and doing in the face of evidence that people and citizens have found. And then at the end of it, you can kind of check, you know, whether you think it was the results of these 3 categories of dealing with the evidence constitutes a conspiracy or not. But anyway, so you're in the jury, and I am a lawyer presenting the evidence. Okay. First of all, we want to also know what a conspiracy is. A lot of people have no idea about what a conspiracy is. So we're going to read it to you from Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, page 309, 310, defines conspiracy as a combination or confederacy between 2 or more persons formed for the purpose of committing by their joint efforts some unlawful or criminal act, or some act which is lawful in itself but becomes unlawful when done by the concerted action of the conspirators, or for the purpose of using criminal or unlawful means to the commission of an act not in itself unlawful. That's a lot said, isn't it? But in some cases, a conspiracy is the crime itself, and in other cases, it is what they're doing is a crime, and sometimes it's both. So now, to find what a person guilty of a conspiracy, A person is guilty of conspiracy with another person or persons to commit a crime if with the purpose of promoting or facilitating its commission, he, A, agrees with such other person or persons that they or one or more of them will engage in conduct which constitutes such crime of an attempt or solicitation to commit such crime, or B, agrees to aid such other person or persons in the planning or commission of such crime or of an attempt to solicitation to commit such crime. Crime of conspiracy is distinct from the crime contemplated by the conspiracy. Some jurisdictions do not require an overt act as an element of the crime. A conspiracy may be a continuing one. Actors may drop out, others drop in. The details of operation may change from time to time. The members need not know each other or the part played by others. A member need not know all the details of the plan or the operations. He must, however, know the purpose of the conspiracy and agree to become a party to a plan to effectuate that purpose. So you can see that conspiracies are real, and conspiracies are proven in court to exist. And once those things are proven between the combination of those people, or the confederacy of those people, each one of them is liable for all that they are found guilty of in the act of the crime. So a lot of people don't know when they don't know what a conspiracy is, they don't know when they're looking at one or when they're not looking at one. A lot of people say, hey, I don't believe in conspiracies, but I agree with the fact that we ought to be in Iraq and Afghanistan, even though they had nothing to do with 9/11 or any of those kinds of things. But I agree with the end. Well, even if you're not involved or know any of the parties, if you're in agreement with the crime going on, you think you're innocent. A lot of people have been convicted of a conspiracy when they did not know they were participating in it, because they didn't actually know what a conspiracy constituted. So anyway, just thought you better know that. Okay, now that we've determined what a conspiracy is, the first thing I wanted to tell you is what an architect really is, just shortly. Architects are not engineers. If he's an engineer, you actually call him an architect, an architectural engineer. That's an engineer that's specialized in architecture and went to some of both schools. Most architects are not engineers. In fact, first day of school in architecture, they said if you want to do structures, if you get into structures, we'll give you the telephone number of some really good engineers. So they didn't want you really solving structural problems. So what do architects do? Architects are generalists. They put together information, lots of it. They also organize other consultants. They are the overall lead person in charge of a project. They mainly design projects. For instance, the architect on the World Trade Center did not do any calculations for the structure of it. They hired a structural engineer. The structural engineer did all that. The architect did a lot of the design, how it looked. They also handled the materials, how the materials go together, what kind of materials are used, all the way down to the lighting, how much lighting was required. And they hire all kinds of consultants to come in and work under them. And then the architect coordinates all those consultants, puts it into one package, and when he's happy that all of this stuff is coordinated and put into one package properly and that it all fits together properly, and he's in charge of that, he has to review everything that every engineer and every consultant has done. Then he will stamp it and sign and seal it. So that's how they work. They're generalists. They know a little bit about everything and not enough about anything. Number 2 here is the history of the World Trade Center. I'd like to tell you a little bit about it, how it got started over here. This was a project actually by Rockefeller, the David Rockefeller. And it was for the redevelopment of the southern tip of Manhattan. And so they needed something to vitalize the area. They put together this project for the New York Port Authority. And they took about 10 years planning it and building it, maybe even more, 10 or 12 years. And in 1973, I do believe both towers were in completion, not everything around it, but both towers for sure. And actually, believe it or not, by 2001, these buildings had come into condemnation problems because it had a lot of it, about 60% of the building had asbestos fireproofing in it, and the city had warned them on several occasions that they either had to take that out or they would condemn the building. So these two twin towers were actually, you might call them, obsolete towers. The plaza, the four-story plaza that's under that connects underground under the plaza there. There's 4 stories of shopping under there. And that was also closed. That was closed because the shopping center wasn't really doing that well. And 6 weeks before 9/11, 2001, Larry Silverstein, who designed and built, well, he didn't design it, he's the land developer, had this building built. This is Building 7, which he had incorporated into the World Trade Center by a bridge, and it became known as World Trade Center 7. But he put in a bid in 2001 to lease the entire World Trade Center. It was up for lease. Quite why, I don't exactly know. But I don't think it had ever been leased before because this was a government project entirely. It was built by public funds, and it was administrated by a public entity. But Larry Silverstein, a private land developer, bought the lease on it for $100 million for 99 years. In the contract, he had a provision to rebuild the World Trade Center in case if it was destroyed by acts of terrorism. He also took out an insurance policy with a terrorism rider for $3.5 billion for an act of terrorism. Well, there were 2 jets involved in 9/11, 2001, so he claimed 2 incidents for $7 billion. And so far, he's collected about $4.3 billion of that, and then he sued the airlines for $12 billion for allowing their jets to crash into his buildings. And so that's kind of how that's looking at the moment. So that's some of the history, taking you right up to the time of 2001. Now, what has the government first told us, and the news media told us, is that the Twin Towers, after they collapsed, they had lots of shows on television, even Channel 9, showing these Twin Towers and how they were constructed. And they called this, their term for it was called a hollow tube. And so people got the idea that all that these buildings were exterior walls with no structure on the inside. Well, with a little investigation, you find out that these, let me turn to my little charts here. Instead of a hollow tube with just the outlines, you have an inner tube. But it's not only a tube, it's actually a structured building. Some people call it, it's a gravity core. Actually, the way it was designed is it's heavy steel with a closed, rigid, connected matrix. That's what this is. And it's steel beams, steel girders, and heavy steel columns. The outside is 14 by 14 steel, high-grade, real high-grade heat strengthened steel, 100,000 psi, compared to the other 36,000 psi on the interior columns. So this is more than twice. The exterior columns, in terms of the steel, is more than twice as strong as the interior. Well, anyway, now the shell, this is really, not only is it just columns, these columns are connected with a large spandrel. Okay, this shows it a little bit. This right here is a spandrel panel. It's at least 2 inches thick of steel. It's 54 inches deep, 2 inches thick, and it's completely welded to all the columns. These gray lines here are the columns. They're only 3'3" to center line of the exterior columns, which leaves 2'1" between each column. So the columns are that far apart. They're 14 inches wide, only that far apart. They're all welded with these spandrel panels, deep spandrel panels. So what happens is it forms what is called a Verindel truss. You've seen trusses like this right here is a truss. They're in diagonals. Well, also if you have a rectangle like this and you have vertical pieces and horizontal pieces only, if you weld them tight together, it forms a truss, and it's called a Verindel truss. So the outside walls are huge Verindel trusses. They were designed to take care of all lateral loads, and the interior core was to take care of all gravity loads. So now it also had a diaphragm space frame floors that connect the core to the shell. So that's what this is. These are the trusses, but the trusses go both ways. And whenever you have trusses going both ways, or structural members going both ways, they form what they call a diaphragm or a space frame. That's called a space frame. But when you connect the tops of these, rather than just put a floor on it, if you connect them integrally, like run steel pegs through it and weld them and then pour concrete onto that, that's called making a diaphragm. So all these floors were diaphragm space frames. And then the corrugated steel that went on the tops of these trusses were all pointing towards the curvatures were pointing towards the exterior. So if anything hit that, the corrugation didn't just roll up. You know how you can roll corrugated metal? You can roll it up. You can't roll it up lengthwise with the corrugation. It will resist rolling. Well, all the corrugations were running towards the exterior of the building. Now, I know that Doug wanted me to talk about wind loading. And I did. I did an analysis of the wind loading on the building according to the Southern Building Code. But they only give you the requirements or the method of calculating it up to a 60-story building. Anything that's above 60 stories, they require wind tunnel testing. And they determine all that from wind tunnel tests. So I could only use the 60-story formulas, and I came up with like 36 billion pounds, foot-pounds would be what the load on this building would be. And I tried to compare that with the impact of a jet, 767, weighing about 320,000 pounds, hitting at the two locations, one at about the 93rd floor and the other one at the 78th floor. And derived, to my own astonishment, I found that that also was high. It was comparable, but you can't really calculate a jet hitting as one existing 380,000 pound load that's going to stay there. It's momentarily. It's not like taking this box right here and dropping it down on the floor. because that box still weighs the same amount, it's still on the floor. You calculate the impact load plus the load it still has. When you have a jet hit something, everything dissipates. The weight of it goes out the windows. The weight of the fuel ignites and blows up everywhere and gets out of the building. Also, the time it takes to stop something is involved in the load, the impact load. So once it pierced the skin, it was knocked around through all these columns, and you have to figure all of those angled vector loads as this stuff hit different columns and spun around. So what I'm telling you is it's almost impossible to calculate mathematically the real impact load of a jet hitting a building like this. I mean, that would be just pretty complicated because of the mathematics involved. So anyway, on the tops of this building was a 5-story hat truss. That's shown here in the red at the top. It was built right here in downtown McQueenie here. You can look out there. We have a train bridge that's got a truss on it, and a heavy truss. It's probably 2.5 stories. And it's maybe, if that much, maybe just 2 stories. And but its span is something like 200 feet or more. And it can take heavy loaded trains and park them out there, and there's no problem. Well, this 5-story truss only spans in one direction about 30 feet and the other direction about 60 feet. So and it's taking all these, if there's any tension on this wall, it transfers it over here to the heavy core of the building. And so here would be a damaged section, but this area right here would be the localized damage caused by a jet. And what happens is, because it's a space frame, the failure isn't from one side to the other all the way across because of the structural members running in both directions. So you only have localized collapse, and even FEMA said that that's what they had, was localized collapse. And so anything above these collapsed exterior members moves in terms of tension on this outer wall above the collapsed area, and then up to these heavy trusses. And that then transfers the load over to puts the other side also in tension, and then puts compression down on the gravity core of the building. At first, when I looked at this, I went, you could probably sever the columns all the way around this building right here, and it would still stand up due to the heavy 5-story hat truss that would put all the weight right back down on the gravity core in the middle. But then I thought, well, that's not even necessary, because to analyze it that way, because of the Verindel trusses, where you see all these gray lines, that's where the spandrel, the heavy steel spandrel panel is. And even if all of these were knocked out, you still have these purple lines here show the spandrel panels going over to the other remaining columns on the side, which is indicated here in blue, meaning all of this destruction on the Twin Towers is encapsulated, is isolated from the rest of the building by the different members of the building. All right, you see these areas here too, these big wide bands on the building? Kind of look at that and you wonder what that is. Those are the mechanical floors. And what they did here at the top floor with the 5-story hat truss is also done at the 3-story mechanical floors. Those have space trusses in them as well that connect the core to the outer wall. And these resist sway in the building to keep sway from getting large. And also these floors, all the floors in the World Trade Center were heavy floors, like for a library, a law library or something like that. So all the floors were heavy enough to support a library. So they didn't have to go in and beef up a floor for specialized stuff. except the mechanical floors. The mechanical floors were even beefed up more to handle really heavy equipment placed on the floor. Now I want to cover the FEMA Building Performance Report because it's very interesting what they've said. There's several places I want to read out of here. First of all, I want to say this, that all of the groups, all the professional groups that have done studies on this, like the American Society of Civil Engineers and FEMA, they have never looked at the damage in terms of what caused the damage. They've always assumed the government and media story that what happened did in fact happen, just as the government has said, and then they move from there to review what happened to the building and how the building performed under the given scenario that they were given. They are not looking for something else. And to prove that, and this sounds like the other reports as well, I have the executive summary here from the FEMA report done on the World Trade Center. And it says, the events following the attacks in New York City were among the worst building disasters in history and resulted in the largest loss of life from any single building collapse in the United States. Of the 58,000 people estimated to be at the World Trade Center complex, 2,830 lost their lives that day, including 430 responders, 403. Two commercial, and I'm going to give you, this is how it all sounds. Two commercial airliners were hijacked. Each was flown into one of the two 110-story towers. The structural damage sustained by each tower from the impact combined with the ensuing fires resulting in the total collapse of each building. As the towers collapsed, massive debris clouds consisting of crushed and broken building components fell into and blew into surrounding structures, causing extensive collateral damage and in some cases igniting fires and causing additional collapses. In total, 10 major buildings experienced partial or total collapse, and approximately 30 million square foot of commercial office space was removed from service, of which 12 million belong to the World Trade Center complex. So that gives you the idea. They're not looking for what actually happened. They've assumed what happened and then said, now how did the building respond to what we've been told happened? Now, here is a major statement they've made in here. Preliminary analysis of the damaged structures, together with the fact the structures remained standing for an extended period of time, suggests that absent other severe loading events, such as a windstorm or earthquake, the buildings could have remained standing in their damaged states until subjected to some significant additional load. Okay, we'd all agree with that because we all saw the buildings still stand long after the jets collided into them. However, the structures were subjected to a second simultaneously severe loading event in the form of fires caused by the aircraft impacts. So what they're saying is the collisions didn't knock the building down. The fires afterwards caused the initial collapse to start the global collapse. So there's some problems. I just want to read you what they've said first, and then we'll get into that. Another important message that they've written. The collapse of these structures is particularly significant in that prior to these events, no protected steel frame structure, the most common form of large commercial construction in the United States, had ever experienced a fire-induced collapse. Thus, these events may highlight new building vulnerabilities not previously believed to exist. They've admitted that none of these buildings before 9/11, 2001, have ever collapsed from fire. Even FEMA is saying this. Here's the national response they're calling for. So if you think they've changed their mind about how we ought to build buildings, even though they've said that's what we ought to do, these new vulnerabilities, listen to what they say the national response to this. Resources should be directed primarily to aviation and other security measures rather than to harden buildings against airplane impact. So even though we see this and we see, wow, the huge steel structures, fire protected, can collapse from jet airlines, forget that. We're not going to, even though we said we're vulnerable to these things and we might ought to look into that, how we ought to fix that, forget that. What we ought to do is work on more security and work on aviation. Now, the relationship and cooperation between public and private organizations should be evaluated to determine the most effective mechanisms and approaches in the response of the nation to such disasters. And that's what I wanted you to hear out of FEMA before we look at the evidence on this. Now we're going to look at Tower 2. Tower 2 is right here. This is the south tower. The jet hit, this was the second jet. The first jet had already hit. About 25 minutes later, the jet, both of them were 767s. The south tower was hit between the 78th and 84th floor. And however, the Tower 2, second tower, well, it says here it was actually hit 18 minutes after the first tower. The firemen, during this event, well, the firemen actually got to the 78th floor, and they said they found several pockets of fire, and they were going to put it out with 2 lines. And their terminology they use, we're going to knock out the pockets of fire with 2 lines. Now, this audio tape was not released until just a couple of years ago. It had been protected from others. The government wouldn't release these tapes until a couple of years ago when it was found out that the firemen were actually there. They saw a couple of some pockets of fire. They're going to put out all of it with 2 lines. And immediately after that statement on the radio, the building commenced to collapse. Now, right here about where the jet hit, this corner, it did hit at an angle in this corner, but the whole wingspan did hit it. It toppled, it began to topple, it tilted in the easterly direction. This is west, that's north, this is east, this is south. So it tilted over building 4, which is this 10-story building here. It tilted 22 degrees. Now I want to show you this on my chart, show you how significant this is. Well, we'll start here. See, this is if this had been a natural collapse due to the weakening of the members by a jet, and this rotation started, you would expect that this whole top 33, 32 floors would go off the top with integrity and likely just hit the ground as intact 33 stories of building. That's what you would have if it was natural. And this was what you'd have to resist a natural occurrence, is the center of gravity of the 32-story segment is the distance y, which is 192 feet. So what you would do here is you calculate the weight of the whole 32-story segment, and then you multiply it by, and the weight is 290,000 kips, and then the force moment of that would be the distance. See, here's the point of rotation is right here. So the y is 192 feet. What you do is you multiply 290,000 kips by 192 feet to get 55,680,000 foot kips, and each kip is 2,000 pounds. So what you need over here on the blue zone over here to stop this rotation, you would need an equal force being applied to the other side. Now, what was that force? Well, there wasn't. There was no force out there to resist that rotation. And of course, there's vectors in here. You'd have a downward vector as well, but once this center of gravity, and at a 22-degree slope, it's right over the edge, so that becomes null. This thing is going to go over the side. So, but what did you have? Instead of having a chunk like we saw on the other poster, you've got this smoldering pile of very small pile of rubble and dust. And dust is all over southern Manhattan, and you've got this very low stack of debris. So this is not natural. This could not have been a natural occurrence. That's just impossible. You can't have a chunk that huge begin rotation and just fall into dust, the whole building. So this is evidence that something else was going on here. Some reason this chunk didn't hit the ground like this. Here's another problem. If there's not explosive materials used somehow, and all the material is still there and not blown elsewhere, just stacking. This building is not built in the form that is conducive to what they call pancaking. Remember, the government said it was a pancake action that started. Pancake more applies to buildings that are made of slip form lift slab construction. Lift slab is where you go build a slab, you put columns up in the air, and you pour about 4 or 5 slabs down around the columns, and you put jacks under them, and you jack up each floor. You jack up another floor, and you jack up another floor around the columns, and you lock off the slab around the columns. These buildings have actually pancaked in history. You can look that up on the internet. Pancaking of buildings. It's a type of building. It's called lift slab construction. These buildings weren't lift slab at all. There was no way that these floors would just collapse and crash down around the columns. So anyway, what you would have here, if you had all the material still in this building and it just fell down and it fell in its own footprint without any explosive aid, you would have a stack of debris 27 stories tall. All the slabs in that building, 110 of them above ground. This is a 23-story building. That means you'd have rubble, a huge pile of it down there, if none of this material had been exploded into the air and settled all over Manhattan. Now, the collapse of Tower 1. Tower 1, and this is what my other chart I was showing, is so close to the hat truss at the top. I don't believe that anything could permit that building to start an initial collapse that close to the hat truss. All these members would have been in tension. All of them would have had these horizontal spandrel panels with a verendal truss carrying all the weight of the floors above this collapsed area down to the edge, as well as the tension in the top. So also there was a woman waving for attention, and she was standing in the hole that this jet made. That also means the fires were cooling, and you saw the smoke coming out of these buildings. Dark, black smoke, that's an indication of oxygen-starved fires. If fire was going to destroy these buildings, it should have done it immediately when the fire was the hottest. But you wait an hour or 2 hours, most of the fuel burned out exploded on the outside of the building. It just went straight through the building and blew up in a big, huge cloud. But these fires were oxygen starved. They were smoldering fires. They weren't the kind of fires that continue to heat. Like we have an illustration over here on these posters. I believe unfortunately, it's this one in the very back. I'll pull it out for you. Of buildings that have burned 24 hours. I mean real infernos. Look at this one. It burned all night long. This one. Look what's left of it. It didn't fall down. This one consumed everything from top to bottom. I think it was 32 floors. And look, it did not collapse. And this is what happens with natural collapsing. They fall over in chunks, just like that 32-story top should have done. This should have toppled you've seen these big buildings in South America and various places. It happens pretty often. You know, something happens in a 10 or 12, 15-story building, just fall over like that. That's what should have happened here on Tower 2. That whole top should have just fallen off. It didn't do that. It went down like everything else in a pile of smoke and debris. Now, the collapse of Building 7. And we're going to get to what really caused these collapses on all these buildings. Building 7, most people never even knew about that, including myself. Building 7 was very unpublicized. They didn't talk about Building 7 hardly at all. We didn't even know it till a year. I know it was a year afterwards before I knew about it. Building 7 is 47 stories tall. It also collapsed, was not hit by a jet, but it collapsed into its footprint at 5:20 on 9/11/01. And they have video of people giving a countdown for this collapse, saying 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. NIST, well, first of all, the first reports didn't even include Building 7 in it. And FEMA made some kind of statement like, I think I even have it on one of these posters, says, we don't really know why Building 7 fell. There needs to be more research. But the big key to this, to Building 7, came with an admission by Larry Silverstein, who I've talked about, who purchased the World Trade Center lease 6 weeks before 9/11. Here's a picture of him right here. There was a PBS video interview of him made 1 year later. It was called America Rebuilds. And PBS asked him what happened to Building 7. And I have his quote right here. I'll read it to you. It says, I remember getting a call from the fire commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life, maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse, unquote. Well, anybody in the building industry knows what pull means. Pull means controlled demolition. Why don't you just demolish that building? Well, the fire department, he says, the fire department decided to make that decision. Well, okay, since you've suggested it, we'll do it. Well, I got some problems with that. I believe that he told partial truth and partial lied, and it's pretty easy to figure out where the lie is. The fire department does not have expertise on board to demolish 47-story skyscrapers. That's not their job. Fire departments put out fires. They keep buildings from collapsing. That's what they were doing in Tower 2. They don't go in and wire buildings for demolition. They don't even have the skill to do that. Number two, this was a private building. They don't have they can't use public monies to demolish a private building. And of course, the incredible thing is, how could they wire a building 47 stories to fall as wonderfully and beautifully and professionally as it did into its footprint, as I have photographs of this around here, with only 6 or 7 hours, while they still may be under attack? At that period of time, they didn't know if there was more jets going to come or not. So they're trying to say to us that somebody went in there on the day of all this, in the debris and smoke and trash, and they studied this building and studied the connections and figured out how much charges to put on each connection and where to put them and how much. It would take them 5 hours just to find the plans, much less get started on what they're going to do with it. So what is obvious here, here's where he told the truth. The building was pulled. Building 7 was pulled. Here's where he lied. He had the building wired prior to 9/11. This building was pre-wired and ready to go. And when the planes hit, which he knew were going to hit, he waited for the right opportunity, talked to them and says, we're going to pull this building. So this building was conventionally demolished with conventional demolition that you can hire in every big city in the world. These were unconventional demolitions. But both of them were all of this was demolitions. If he can pre-wire this one prior to 9/11, he can certainly wire those two prior to 9/11. Now, problem with this building as well is, and it didn't bother him to violate the law, because you can't wire buildings. I've even heard people say, well, Ron, or don't architects and people, don't they build in means of demolishing buildings when you build them? That's laughable. You talk about something funny. You go into an architect's office and tell them you want to build a 110-story skyscraper, but you want to put in the demolition charges for the future, and wait till it becomes obsolete and then you can. No, that does not happen. That's against the law. You cannot have a building wired for demolition while it's occupied. All of these buildings were occupied on 9/11/01. But this building was, we already know by Larry Silverstein's own admission, this building was wired in advance, and he knew it. And if he knew that, there's no reason why he couldn't have known and had something to do with providing the security for these two buildings to also be wired. And we're also going to find out what they were wired with. How many people have heard of nanothermite? Well, this is a new product. I'd never heard of it. Nanothermite came out in about 2000, year 2000. It's been made at Los Alamos Lab. And there's one other military lab that makes it. I forgot the name of it, but I know Los Alamos does. And it is a high-tech new demolition material. It's an intimate mix of very fine strands of aluminum and iron oxide, with some other things depending on what they want to do with it. It's very designable. They can do many different things with it. These strands are finer than a human hair. They have to be mixed in the right proportion. Some have said, okay, well, the material that you found in the dust samples of all three of these buildings just meant that, well, there was aluminum and there was iron in these buildings. That's where you're getting this material from. And nanothermite could happen naturally through the combination of jet having aluminum running into steel that has iron in it. This is laughable. That's like saying, well, I tell you what let's do. Let's just throw some rocks and some old scrap steel in a big room and we'll heat it up, maybe we'll get a Chevrolet out of it. That's not how you make nanothermite. Nanothermite has to be made in a high-tech lab under very strict, regulated and design parameters. This is not anything you could make in a cave in Afghanistan. It's nothing I could make in my garage. That's not how that is made. And from the dust samples, every dust sample taken, which at least 4 have been tested, and they've been all from around this area, they all contain nanothermite. And some of this nanothermite is unignited. It's still, they subject it to a blowtorch and it'll blow up still. And the byproduct of this stuff they've been blowing up in the samples is molten iron, and it makes little bitty spheres. It goes out into the atmosphere and it makes little tiny round spheres of iron, cooled molten iron. Well, guess what was found in the basements of all 3 of the skyscrapers, 7, 1, and 2? Molten iron burned in the bottom, tons of it. Tons of molten iron burned in the basements of these towers, at least 6 weeks after the collapse. Now the funny thing about that, this was buried under all this debris. That means oxygen starved. Well, how do you have molten iron burning in an oxygen starved environment under the ground? Nanothermite creates its own oxygen for burning. And that's how it burns. It'll burn underwater. It'll burn anywhere, because it makes its own oxygen to eat off of. So, and I'll also show you this. I wanted to at least show you you can get this on the internet. You go to, you can just type in nanothermite paper, and it'll take you to one of the sites that has the paper that's done on it. I believe it's about 17 pages. Yeah, here it is. It's from the Open Chemical Physics Journal. It's called Active Thermetic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe. And it has all the information you need to know about it. And proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that these buildings, that stuff shouldn't be in there, and it shouldn't have been on a jet. And they only talked about hijackers with box knives, not hijackers who have run into the building with tons of nanothermite and placed it throughout the building. One of the things that makes this whole hijacking scenario by radical Muslim extremist Islamo-fascists, as old McCain used to love to say, the only thing that makes this ridiculous is that why would terrorists wire these buildings with tons of nanothermite and all these connections and then hijack a plane to run into it? Isn't that a little kind of stupid? I mean, why not just pull the switch? I mean, if they wired it, why wouldn't they just pull the switch? If there's explosives found in this building, as this nanothermite, it rules out anything legitimate about hijackers. Because hijackers, if they were the guilty party, why would they bother to do that? Next question is, how would hijackers, how would criminal terrorists, Muslim radical extremists, have access to these buildings for hours and days at a time to plant all this stuff, to get all that nanothermite in there? Now, nanothermite can be used in many ways. It's very, like I said, it's very designable for what you wanted. You can paint it. You can spray this stuff on like a spray. You can coat it. You can use it for coatings. You can put it in gel like C4. You can wrap it around columns in any way you want to, or you can paint it on. And then you can make triggers with it, stuff that will ignite other stuff. The residues and active thermite has been found in all the dust samples here, as well as its byproducts in the basements. Now, here's another thing I want you to consider about hijackers. The approach, the first time hit by 530 miles per hour is phenomenal for a good pilot, much less a novice hijacker. I want you to think about this. You see how both of these jets have hit the buildings entirely with their whole wingspan? Not one segment of the wing missed the building. The whole jets of both of them went right smack into the building. Now I want you to think of this in a different way. It's as hard to hit a structure that's 208 feet wide with a jet that's 157 feet wide and get the whole wingtips on that. There's only a few feet of play there, and you're going to hit it at 530 miles an hour, which is 778 feet per second. Try driving your car and turning at a stop sign at 778 miles an hour. And these guys, now think of it this way. You're the pilot, and you've got a little slot between two buildings. Let's say these two buildings are also just 208 feet apart. And what you want to do is fly your plane right between them. Not hit them, but go right between them. And that spot you've got is only 208 feet wide. And you want to guide your jet, which is 157 or so. I think I've got it exactly over here somewhere. You want to fly your jet at 778 feet per second and go right between two towers, only 208 feet apart, and not hit either side and win the day. You talk about some supremo expert pilots. I don't think there's any living pilot that would volunteer to try that. Yet these guys, both of them, hit these towers with not a single part of that jet not dead on to 208 feet. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's phenomenal flying. Phenomenal. And these guys are hijackers who had been drunk the night before at the bar, according to these our government sources and media outlets. They were out there watching pole dancers and getting drunk, and they get on the plane the next morning feeling fine, and they execute this, and none of them were expert pilots at all. I'm just telling you, that's phenomenal. I actually don't believe it. Well, that concludes my presentation on the World Trade Center. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching our first segment on the World Trade Center. And now we're going to spend the second hour on the Pentagon and Shanksville. So getting right into this, we'd like to cover, first of all, what the American Society of Civil Engineers, who did the research on the Pentagon building in their performance report, like to bring up what they've said about it, some of the things. Again, as in the FEMA analysis of the World Trade Center and the NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, their review of Building 7, all of these reports start with the assumption that the government story, or their theory, that hijackers hijacked 4 jets and collided them into the Twin Towers, into the Pentagon, and crashed at Shanksville. All of these reports assume that in the beginning, and they never question it or look for any other data of anything else. And all of them are interested in the performance of the building in response to what the government scenario is. What if it was if the government suggests that it's a jet or even a particular flight, then that's assumed, and then they go and look at what has happened to the building in response. So, and that's the same way with the National Society of Civil Engineers performance report on the Pentagon. And let's just cover some of the evidence that we've been able to find or not find that points to something else. First of all, there's not been a single 757 part that's been verified, found at the Pentagon or shown at the Pentagon. They claim the FBI, and by the way, the National Society of Civil Engineers, did not know anything about the bodies or the plane or anything. Actually, that when they came in, it was already pretty much cleaned up. They just looked at columns and what was left in place after the cleanup, and they knew nothing of that. I mean, they weren't there like the day of or the day after. So they found none of that, and they just were relying on FBI reports, and they have a site plan of the damaged area, and they just report what the FBI told them. And so even though they have not shown a single part of the 757, they have found all the bodies of the passengers and the parts of the passengers that are the things they couldn't confirm as part of a particular passenger. By process of elimination, they said, well, this must be a hijacker because this doesn't fit anything else we found. So, but they have a site plan of this portion in here that shows the location of each body. And they say 189 people died here. Building 7 gets a lot of attention because there's so much information on how it was looking like the proof that it was a controlled demolition. But there were no people that died in Building 7. And the Pentagon is kind of, I'm a member, not a member, but I've signed a petition that was started by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And by the way, I am an architect, in case you missed this in the film somewhere. I signed a petition there calling for a new investigation of the World Trade Center demolitions, in fact, is what they call it now. And but this group focuses mainly on the World Trade Center. They're not interested in the Pentagon, nor are they interested in Shanksville either. I'm sure they all know about stuff there, but they're focused on the World Trade Center. But let's remember, there are 189 people that died at the Pentagon. So we ought to be paying some attention. Even architects and engineers ought to be looking at the Pentagon. Now, as we were talking earlier on break, there are some aircraft parts that were shown in photographs, but these are confirmed not to be part of a 757. So as to this date, there have been no pictures or photographs of anything from a 757 with origin at the Pentagon. Now the approaches. Let's talk about first the approach of the 757 to the Pentagon. Witnesses. Number one, there was several witnesses that were at a gas station. I think we were talking about that on break as well. And they saw the plane coming from the south, and then the government says that it was coming from a southerly direction, more so. And the black box also shows that it records this more northerly direction to confirm with the witnesses. Now, I'd also like to say at 778 feet per second, it'd be hard to really, as you on the ground and this plane at a very close to the ground position, I think it'd be hard to really determine much about that aircraft. Now, the black box flight data recorder shows the northerly approach, as I was talking about, more northerly, while the official path is more southerly. So the black box goes with the witnesses, and apparently there's no witnesses to confirm the government direction of approach. Well, the approach that's shown here is the government suggested approach, and we have a scale model of the 757. That's at 1 to 200, and this Pentagon is built at 1 to 200. And so each inch, and these are 2-inch squares I've drawn on here, each inch equals 16.667 feet. So each square is about 33 feet in each direction. The next thing we want to talk about is a good source for information on the jet and approach on the World Trade Center is from pilots for 9/11 Truth. They've come up with some very good material. They also have a three-dimensional computer model showing the jets and their approach from the two different angles, supposed angle, the alleged angles. And they've also analyzed the flight data recorder, the black box material, and it shows that it stopped about 8 seconds. It quit recording, the government said, and the government has released this information finally. It wasn't too long ago when they released it. And then the pilots for 9/11 Truth did an analysis of it and found out that the plane is about 400 to 500 feet higher than what they say its location is. And they have a reason on there because you have to manually change the altimeter readings for close to Earth conditions. And it was set when they got up in the air, they moved it ahead, and when they came close to the Earth again, they did not move it back. So, and that's how they determined that it was not at the right height the government said. And that's on the black box data. Now, they also analyzed the approach, the government said, and 3,400 feet from the impact point going that direction is a tower that's 308 foot tall, that's in the direct path between buildings of the impact line. So this plane had to clear 308 feet. It had to take out a light pole, the first light pole. They said it took out 5 light poles. That's pretty amazing in itself, as a jet sent to pick up George Bush at Hobby Airport clipped 1 light pole and crashed. This jet took out 5 light poles, didn't leave a single part, and leveled off within seconds. I mean, not even seconds. We're talking, when this thing is approaching, Let me give you some idea of scale here. From this corner to that corner is 923 feet. So 1 second out here is probably about here, see? So you get an idea of how many seconds. So let's say the tower is out over here somewhere. It's not even to the end of the wall over there. So, and the tower is 4.3 seconds from impact. So it had to clear 304 feet, and 4.3 seconds later hit here. So it had to drop 304 feet. It had to clear, it had to hit the first light pole, which was 0.3 seconds, I believe, 0.3 seconds from the impact, hit the other 4 poles, and then it also had to level out. And so it leveled out probably just fractions of seconds at only maybe a foot or 2 foot above the ground, and then travel level until it hit the actual second floor right in half. So if the fuselage was this big, the second floor was right here. It just sliced, in other words, it sliced the plane in half. Now, so the pilots for 9/11 Truth did a study of the arc from the tower to the impact point and discovered that the arc made a radius of 2,085 feet. And then they multiplied, they figured out the acceleration, which was the speed, 778, I think they used, times 778, so they squared it. And they divided it by the, I can't even remember what the formula is, but the result was that there was 10 Gs on the plane, and the plane can only do about 2.5 Gs. However, when not to get to, this is why I didn't do a chart of this finally, because when I tried to graph this at home myself on graph paper and figure it out, I was not coming up with the same thing, even I was using their same formulas and everything. I came up with a radius of about 8,000 feet, so that put the real G's at about 2.5. But that would be even at that, that's the maximum what the jet can do itself. All these pilots apparently were crackerjacks. They take the planes to their absolute limits and do phenomenal acrobatics with them that normal pilots, so skilled pilots with 30,000 hours would have a hard time maneuvering. The obstacle field. We talked about the television antenna, the light poles. Now there's a generator here. Of course, they say it hit the corner, and I show and plan where the generator is, and it certainly hits the corner of it. And these circles on here, you can't see it from here, but they will have spools on them eventually. These spools were actually in place the day before, or on the 7th, September the 7th. The aerial photograph shows these spools in place. This jet went right over them at 2 feet above ground, and the spools are still sitting there. So that's some pretty phenomenal flying again to negotiate all these obstacles prior to hitting the building and not even disturb these spools. One of the witnesses said the jet almost hit their antenna on their car. Well, let me tell you what experienced pilots or anybody that flies knows about this. First of all, experienced pilots say you can't fly this kind of a plane. This is a passenger plane. It's called a big plane. It's built for flying. You can't fly this plane at 10 feet to the ground because you have what they call a ground effect. And it's at least the width of the wings. So if you are flying, and this wingspan here is 125 feet. So if this plane is flying anything less than 125 feet, it cannot go below that without just driving the nose. You'd have to crash it. It won't glide at that speed, at that close to the ground, because it's built to fly. They even build planes now that fly about 2 feet above the water. They start off in the water and they use very little speed, and they're gliders, and they build up just enough speed to get off the water, and they stay there, and they rely on what they call the ground effect. The wings, the area, pushing air, which won't compress, and it pushes that air between them and the water, and it's called a ground effect plane. You can look that up on the internet too, and they show you some very neat crafts that fly around just 2 feet above the water with very little energy. So you can imagine what a 757 would do with its wingspan, which is larger. The area of the wingspan on a 757 is 2,000, it's over 2,000 square feet. So it's like flying your house plan. There's a lot of houses that have just 2,000 square feet. So to pick up a plane as big as your house and drive that at 500 miles an hour close to the ground, it's going to take off. I mean, you're going to compress air between it and the ground. So pilots have said that. The other amazing thing about this is that they have something called a backwash or a backdraft, and what that does is it throws air out the back of the plane, and if it touches it, if it gets close to like if it passed over this freeway like it said and clipped a light pole, any cars in the area would have been blown off the road. It will tip trucks over. It will throw cars whirling in the air. It's about 40 tons. Experienced pilots said there'd be at least 40 tons of backdraft that close to the ground. So if anybody could claim that it was hit their antenna, they should have also claimed, and I had to get out of my car, which was rolling down the hill, because it would have blown them clean off the road. The other thing that's very strange here is, again, showing this crackerjack pilot of a 757 flies at 2 feet above the ground and not hitting the lawn at all. There's not a single scrape on the lawn from the jet. We've talked about the G effect, the G on the plane, the ground effect prevents the low flying. Unless it's a military, military jets don't have much. They don't have much wing area. They use speed totally. I mean, they don't fly well at real low speeds. Okay, the damage on the face of the Pentagon after the impact and before the collapse, 20 minutes later. Let me move around here on this side of the model again, and. This basically is the fuselage. They say, well, this is where the fuselage went in. And I'll also show you in a minute, I'll take this apart. It has all the column damage. I have the columns inside showing the damage in there. There's no damage. Now, if you project this wingtip onto here, you're going to have wingtip damage out here. And if you do it out here, you're going to have it here. Well, isn't it funny that on this building, there's no damage out here, and this is even stated. This is not my conclusion either, just from doing the model. This is concluded by American Society of Civil Engineers. They said there's no wing damage out here. They suggest that when the supposed jet hit the generator, it knocked this wing back. Now, since they can't show a picture of the wing in the yard, see, they're trying to say that the whole jet went in there, every single part. That's why no parts were found in the yard. So they said, well, the wing must have hit the generator. It got knocked back and folded in and followed the jet in. And the same thing happened on the other end when it hit one of these, some kind of a mechanical part out here. I forgot what they call that. And it also followed the jet in because the hole isn't wide enough for this jet, the entire thing, to go in. The other problem is this wing section. I mean, the tail, the top of the tail would have been near the top of the building. there's no damage there either. And they've admitted that. American Society of Civil Engineers admit there's no damage up here. So what happened to this tail section? If there's no damage, there should be some tail section laying out in the yard, right? No tail section, no wing section found out there anywhere. I guess the tail then also slammed back and followed the jet in. So all the parts, apparently, even though the hole isn't large enough, all the parts went in the building. I guess they figure that once this goes in the building, they don't have to show a part. They don't have to discuss the parts. And of course, they have to rely on the government by saying, well, you know, that it was in there. But even not government, I don't know that they've even said that any parts were found in there. Now, the interior damage pattern, that's what we're going to get to now. And I'll take this model apart. You might want to see this. This shows all the damage and the hole where it came out. It went through, let's see, this is C, D, and E wing, C, D, and E ring. And here's the main, that's the fuselage, and they apparently are trying to make the suggestion that the fuselage itself came out this hole in the AE drive. This is one area that's open for vehicles to drive in. And then the lower level is sustained all the column damage, mostly. The second floor only had 2 columns that were severely damaged, and you can see these here. And the yellow columns are very minor damage. So you can see that there's not many real, the blue ones are also non-functional. But the red ones are severe, like gone or missing, are really severe. I found that also amazing. It was very tricky. They used red, the color of red, to locate columns that were either missing or impaired beyond function. Well, that doesn't really tell you much about it. And then the blue ones, they say more severe damage, but less than red. And then yellow, and then there's green and yellow. And yellow is the least. And then they located the white ones are ones that are totally undamaged. So you can see what the damage pattern is inside the building. And by the time the fuselage goes through the hole here, there's nothing but yellow and white columns. I mean, and how it goes through there without severe damage is very interesting. And these little black boxes on the second floor, that shows where the floors collapsed. And the strange thing about the second floor is that so few columns were damaged. And here's what the American Society of Civil Engineers said as a result. The plane, this is their own language, and I can read it to you if you'd like. The plane must have slipped into the first floor. It did not go into the second floor. Even though there were bodies found on the second floor, there were not, and some of these bodies, of course, were people that were in the building. But there was the main part of the destruction was on the first floor. So they concluded that once it hit, even though it hit almost right on the second floor like a knife blade, the whole plane, the whole fuselage and everything went into the first floor. So that is pretty phenomenal too. At 530 miles an hour, a jet that hits right in the middle of a floor, it all goes suddenly into the first floor at level flight. You know, I might see that if it was at an angle going into it like this. You might say, well, it hit the first floor and just slid in there, but it wasn't sliding. And why is it not sliding? Because remember those photos they released? The photos were taken over here in the corner. They were looking right down here, and they say, well, there it is. And it's, of course, it's hiding behind another stand they have sitting here. So you only see, I don't even know what you see. It's so nondescript. And so, and they say, well, it was in level flight. And it was only 2 feet off the ground. And the whole plane slid into the first floor and did minor damage to the second floor. I still believe that the hole in the back wall is being so perfectly round and so straight on with this line. I find it really, and so much, the columns are so close. In fact, the hole is bigger than the column range would permit. I'm just wondering how in the world, and the reason, let me tell you a reason why I did this model. When you look at the report that the American Society of Civil Engineers put out, they don't draw to scale. Why wouldn't they draw to scale? I mean, there's something about drawing to scale gives you more information than drawing not to scale. What they do is give you a bunch of grid lines, and the columns they draw on it are 10 foot and square. So you look at it, it means totally nothing. You know where the columns are, that they're on a certain grid line. But you don't know, you can't determine what happened, what is in line with water. If there's is there an opening wide enough for that to get in? How wide? They don't give it to you. It's like a general way of just giving you some information. So anyway, I took their general information and turned it into a scale model that would actually show, is there a path large enough for that to travel? And if it is, does it damage anything else on its path? Well, you can see by looking in here, if that fuselage went that way, it would have taken out some more, it would have done more serious column damage, especially to leave a perfect round hole in a 2 foot thick wall built of 10 inches of concrete and 8 inches of brick, a limestone. It's 8 inches of limestone, 10 inches of brick, and it's amazing. Whatever, I got it written over here. But anyway, and that's what the front wall is, and that's what the back wall is. So it had to, this fuselage, apparently they're claiming, went through 4 feet. And you know what this fuselage is made out of, this lightweight carbon material is in the nose. And so this thing went through 2 feet, 10 inches of reinforced concrete and the brick and limestone, and did the same right here. So it went through 4 feet of that. And look at the column. The columns are unimpaired. They're just minor cracks. That's what the yellow is, minor cracks. Could be just heat cracks from fire. But that whole fuselage, and it made a hole bigger than the path. Isn't that strange? And one of the photos of the Pentagon, released by people in the Pentagon, show members of even Rumsfeld or some high-up official helping to carry a big box that's covered in a blue tarp, and they're removing it from the Pentagon yard and after the on 9/11. And these guys are in suits and ties. They're not workers. They're not firemen. These guys are executives. They are high officials, and they are moving something out of this area covered with a blue tarp. Now, why would all that secrecy, why would you need to cover, why would men in ties, upper level men at the Pentagon, be carrying away something with a blue tarp over it? Anyway, this was a kind of a strange, why the secrecy? Anyway, I think I've covered this before. The National Transportation Safety Board was the one that finally released the the black box flight data recorder that was just analyzed by pilots for 9/11 Truth. The flight data recorder records and shows that the flight deck door was never opened. So if this is the plane that contained the black box that the National Transportation Safety Board released, it could not have been hijacked because the door was never open. The flight data recorder never recorded that the cockpit door of the jet had ever been opened. It was never opened, so no hijacking was possible. So if that was flight 77, then it was flown by the pilots that took off from the airport at flight 77. But I think this is sufficient proof that that this 757, a 757, could not pierce this wall in this fashion, leave these spools undamaged, hit a generator, not leave any parts in the yard anywhere, go through the building through 4 feet of hard material, and have a path through a undamaged column zone, and then bust out at the back in a hole larger than the path through the columns. And that's all I have for the Pentagon. Now moving on to Shanksville, and I guarantee you Shanksville will even be shorter than the Pentagon, but you'll love the information on it. And I am eventually going to do a model of Shanksville. It's going to be the easiest model I ever built. It'll be just a hole, it'll be a little ditch. I'm going to have a model with a big model with a ditch. It's going to be in scale 6 foot deep, how wide? 12 foot wide and about 20 feet long, about the size of a small trailer, utility trailer. And I'm going to put some something that looks like bean cans and trash and paper in it. And that's going to be the crash site for Flight 93. Well, here's the evidence. The mayor of Shanksville says that no 757 jet parts, bodies, or evidence of a plane or jet crash was ever found at Shanksville. The only thing he ever said was the FBI told him they found something out in the woods. And they'd never seen, nobody's ever seen what the FBI found out in the woods. Isn't it funny that all the real FBI, the government stuff, finds something in the hidden dark spaces that you can't go to, and you weren't there when they did it, and they won't show you what it was and where they found it or photographs of it. Isn't that strange? I mean, it looks like if they wanted to put all this stuff to bed, they'd just show you the facts. They'd just show it out to you, you know. Anyway, here's what the mayor says. It says his sister and his friend were first on the site. I mean, before responders or anybody, they were there immediately. They saw nothing but a 5 foot by 20 foot ditch, 6 foot deep. Not a nothing in there, but it looked like a trash pit. They watched as the excavation went on, and they found nothing. The same is said by a Fox News correspondent that was played. Some of you may have seen it. You could probably Google that on the internet and find Fox News correspondent Shanksville, and you'll find him saying the same thing, that it doesn't look like there's a crash of any plane here at all. So that concludes even Shanksville, and you could direct yourselves to that great movie about Flight 93, which may in fact be total fiction. But it certainly did not crash in Shanksville or anywhere around there. So if it crashed somewhere else that nobody knows about, except the FBI, which knows all things in secret. Yes. Let me say this. There's been all kinds of information out there about that too, that voices can be copied and engineered and reused to say anything they want to, so that calls can be made to sound like your loved one and they are not making the call. Somebody else is making the call using your voice and structuring your sentences and statements any way they want to. This has been developed technology, and it's now in use. And So whether or not that happened, again, let me say this about what this presentation was about. This presentation was not about proving what did happen or where anything is. It is about what did not happen, and if what we have been told is actually the truth. And what we can say is, I think without any hesitation, is that the Twin Towers in Building 7 were brought down with nanothermite. This one in a conventional fashion, this one in an a non-traditional fashion, but all were brought down with controlled demolition. And it was done. I think we can conclude that without doubt that nanothermite was used in it, and this is not something that hijackers could have done at all. And the next question is, why would hijackers do this if it was them that wired it? And how dumb would it be for people to wire these buildings and then supposedly wait around for hijackers to hijack a jet and run into it and then blow it up?
Ron, can I speculate as to the answer to that question? If you study the terrorist attacks in Israel, it's very common to set off a bomb in a coffee shop or a bookstore, and then when the first responders go to that site, there's a secondary bomb because they're able to kill government workers, they're able to kill more people. Is it possible that some operative wired these buildings, and then the purpose of the airplane was to get the dramatic news because they knew that everybody would be watching, and then the secondary explosion was to bring the buildings down as a complete and total terrorist act? Is that a good explanation as to why they may have been wired in advance?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, if I was a terrorist, I wouldn't want to be the guy that volunteers. I'm wanting to meet Allah, and tomorrow I'm going to be with the 70 virgins, and I'm doing it just for television, just for something that looks good.
Isn't that the purpose of terrorism? Is to suggest to the public that we can control your feelings, we can control what you see, and we can do it anytime we want, and we can do it in a very dramatic way. Doesn't the terrorist community tend to do that?
Well, I'd say that hey, I guess anything would be possible. No, I don't even think everything is possible. Not everything is possible. I'd say that what happened here, with that scenario, you still can't get around the fact that somebody had to have secured access to this building for months, or at least a month, to put this material in here. You can't do this stuff overnight. Correct. It's not like the night before they wired it and then they got into the jets the next day. This stuff had to be planned. They had to be many of them. They had to be in virtually every floor of the building, if not every third floor. That's still a lot of floors. You got to have access to most every column. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in here, and you've had to have a lot of controlled access and secret access. Somebody had to provide you secret access and protected access to these buildings. This could not have been done by a terrorist, period.
So who did it and why?
Well, let me say this, terrorist, let's back up a minute. When we use the word terrorist, we're assuming foreign terrorists or terrorists from where they've said they're from, Afghanistan or Iraq, or they're radical Muslim extremists, Islamo-fascists, as good old McCain used to say. If it's really them, they just can't get the access to it. Now, and if it's an American terrorist, yeah, they had access to it. If you're going to talk about some officials in our government or some people in our government working with some civilians and working with even others from foreign countries, say Israel, for example, I mean, who stands to gain? What is the only country that's really gained from all of this 9/11 event? where we have hundreds of thousands of Americans tromping all over the Middle East, destroying two countries in the Middle East, where Israel is hated. The only country that's benefited from this is Israel. And I know let me tell you, I'm sure the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are going to turn over. They've done this before. They really can't stand me saying this, but it's just the truth. I don't care. And it's just like talking about 9/11, about talking about these towers. The truth is the truth. America has not benefited from these wars. We've had a lot of our own people killed. It's cost us billions of dollars. The World Trade Center, the first injection into our monetary system, was $200 billion of new paper money entered the very day to keep our money floating. And they've had injections of that paper currency every year since then in terms of billions. The problem with our economics is not only just this stuff that's just happened with these bank frauds and the derivatives scam and all that. It also started here. This is where they started trashing the money. This is where we started borrowing billions of dollars to go kick these people that apparently look fairly innocent of these crimes at the moment. Now, that's not, first of all, what is a terrorist? We need to get back to definitions. Terrorist is a person that will either harm people or property, their lives and their property, and they do it or either threaten to harm them for the purpose of changing a political policy. Well, that includes everybody. Anybody that attempts to change a political policy by using harm or the threat of harm, would that include George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, some of those architects of the Iraq War? I can't remember his name. He was in the Defense Department. After this, they made him head of the World Bank, and they had a problem with his girlfriend. They kicked him out of it. Anyway, these guys, if they actually were involved in this or in the cover-up of this information and saw that the purpose of all this was to get into the Middle East, which they've said they wanted the New American Century, the Partnership for the New American Century, they ought to, the correct word for that would still be PNAC. It would be Partnership for the New Conspiracy. And the new conspiracy was to be a powerful and built-up powerful nation that would institute a police state at home and get into the Middle East and develop all these technologies to surveil everyone and to clamp down on their freedoms and practice it in Iraq and come home and do it in America. So if that's the purpose, if that's what the goal, and bring America down from an independent nation into a new world order as a slave state with all the other states of the world, if that's what the goal is, then I believe that George Bush and all these other people I've named and many more others up there in Washington and Karl Rove and all these guys that we're going to fix and to reinstitute into our government again after the other con guy, whatever his name is, we're right back to where we were with the same people under this same scenario. Somebody mentioned, was there any evidence of the hijackers at all? And I have a paper here. It's called, you can look this up on the internet. It's No Evidence That Muslims Hijacked Planes on 9/11. And it's, I don't know how long it is. It goes into great detail. It's 9 pages long with references all over everything. It's over 60 references to prove that there's not one single shred of evidence that these 19 hijackers any one of them ever boarded a jet of any kind there on these planes on 9/11. Not one single shred. None of the manifests from the official manifest from any of the airlines have ever been released. So some of the ones that have been released, partial manifests from the government that they say came from there, they've been changed over and over again. And even the cameras that they sometimes show a picture of one of these supposed terrorists in an airport. But that wasn't the boarding. There's no boarding pass, there's no boarding stub, there's no evidence whatsoever that these 19 men actually got on these jets. So to put it mildly, if the government actually had to prove their case, they couldn't do it. The government cannot prove their case. So I think we're living in a mythological world. We might as well be worshiping Athena and the Roman god. And I guess if one of our presidents declare himself to be a god, or we're just going to have to go along with it, because you can't question this kind of stuff. I believe that what we have today is there's two groups of people. One that has opinions, and the other group of people are the ones that have facts. And the people that want to believe, and it's based on desire, if you want to believe that the government did not have any involvement with the 9/11, or people in government, and let me say this, when I use the word government, it doesn't mean everybody in every level of government. It means some people in government, some actors. It doesn't mean all of them. But this desire, and let me say what this desire is based upon. It's based upon not knowing what to do. Most people like to know what to do after they hear something. Well, you write your congressman. Oh, I tell you what you do. You elect somebody different. I know what you do. You send the military. You ask your congressman to send out the military. Well, what happens if it's some kind of strange mix that involves your own government, where they're working with foreigners? And I'm actually thinking this World Trade Center and was actually done by foreigners. I don't believe it was actually American FBI members or CIA that wired this building. But I do believe somebody wired it, and I believe they had secured access to it, and that meant they had to have American help and American cover-up. So I believe strongly that we have a foreign power, a foreign army, special ops group that is working in our country, and that needs to be rooted out of here, because that is way bad stuff. And it's connected with our government. So who do you call? Who do you write? That's why nobody likes this information, because it's almost devastating. I don't like it either, because what I do with it, the only thing I can do basically is talk about it. But eventually, something will be done about it. So there's two types of people. Those that have opinions based on desire, that don't care about facts, and the other people are ones that don't have evidence of facts that determines what their opinion is. Instead of most other people have opinions based on their desire, not facts. So what we have to do, what we should do, is use our evidence with the facts of our evidence, and to change people's desire, change their opinion, so that something changes in the country. There's only one other thing I'd like to say about that, though, is that we're going to need God's help on this, because this stuff is big, it involves our government, and eventually we're just going to have some miraculous intervention. God's going to have to work through individual people, and we're going to have His supernatural intervention, because this stuff is big. It's real big, and you don't fight it by writing your congressman. I think it's good for you too, but don't expect any major changes, because you see what the major media does to these people. They trashed Ron Paul on 9/11. They trashed Deborah Medina on 9/11. And they're going to trash everybody else that has even followers. They don't have to believe the facts about 9/11. They can just have somebody in their camp that's holding up a sign saying Deborah Medina, and then have a little 9/11 was an inside job. That spells death for her campaign. So what they're trying to do is weed out all people who question 9/11. So the only people left for politics are people that buy the myth of 9/11. And what are they doing with that myth? They're changing all the policies of America. They're clamping down on the liberties. They're getting us involved in every country in the world. They're clamping down on them in England. We're not the only country that's suffering from this 9/11 stuff. England buys all this garbage, all their politicians, their upper level stuff. And Spain, many of these countries are in the same pattern, and it's by the same global masters that are orchestrating this stuff. And that's why we have a major job ahead of us. But it's doable. Let me say this, the Bible is full of evidence that wicked, degraded societies and corrupt societies do fail. And they will be purged. And there's no reason on earth that this can't happen again. And that we can't be part of this purging of this diabolical type of mentality that's running this thing. I think that's all I can wrap up with. Thank you very much for coming.
So isn't this pretty scary information?
Yes, it is. And you know, some people I think get the feeling like we like the people that present this, the facts about 9/11, that we somehow like it. I mean, why would I like that any more than anybody that worked for the military for 25 years? Why would they like it? I don't like the material any better than anybody. I find it as frightening and as anybody else. The problem, I think the difference is sometimes is your worldview, how you view things. This is not new. Conspiracies are not new. Government conspiracies against their people are not new. This stuff has been going on for centuries and centuries and throughout recorded history for 5,000 years. And that didn't stop. All this stuff hadn't stopped. It continues. But throughout history too, there are purgings. The evil at some time gets purged out of societies. It's happened over and over again. And we're ready for a purging. I believe that 9/11 is going to be the beginning of a purging of evil and of wickedness out of the country, out of bad ideas. In a way, and let me bring up one other thing that's permitted conversation. Here's permitted conversation. If you'd like to talk about how the government covered up or was inept at knowing what the terrorists, the Middle Eastern terrorists were doing prior to 9/11 and why they didn't follow up investigation of these 19 supposed hijackers. This is all very good conversation for them. They love that because it's still on the presumption that these 19 guys did it. So they want to talk endlessly about, oh yeah, she knew about him and she reported him to the FBI and the FBI sat on the information. All that's irrelevant. The reason? Because the evidence now supports the fact that there weren't any hijackers. That wasn't a hijack job. This was a demolition job done by nanothermite. It was all done on the inside. So all that talk about what they knew about some Middle Eastern terrorist and why they were sitting on it and didn't reveal this or that is total bunk and garbage. It's a waste of time. We need to find out who on the inside. We need to talk. Larry Silverstein ought to be indicted. This guy knows all about the World Trade Center. He's even partially admitted it. And this is another evidence of conspiracy. Nobody has even called this guy on the phone. They've never arrested him. They've never taken him downtown. They've never talked to him about this strange comment he made about pulling Building 7. Is that not interesting? Isn't there some investigator in America that would say, you know what, that's pretty interesting. I would like to talk to him in detail downtown under a big light, you know, in a room, smoke-filled. You know, and I want to find out what Larry Silverstein knows about this whole World Trade Center business and nanothermite. I'd want to ask him that. Why hasn't he been asked? And this is why I said at the beginning, we need to ask ourselves 3 questions. Is their assertion ridiculous? Number 1. Number 2, have they investigated or covered up? Or number 3, have they lied? And you're going to find out that every piece of evidence that I've talked about today, the government has either lied about it, they've either covered up or refused to investigate it, or either they made a totally ridiculous assertion that nobody would believe. Now, what does that all add up to? It adds up to with one overwhelming conclusion. We're living in a major conspiracy between government, the media, and a foreign country.